reality. So, and again, I was more interested in social change. I wanted to tell meaningful stories. I wanted to move people to behave and act differently and create change in the world. And
what were some of those first changes that you wanted to create?
well, we always wanted to legalize weed, you know. So all my projects had weed in them. We were really scared of nuclear war and the Cold War. And so we had a lot of statements about that. And of course, a lot of us were LGBTQ, and there was a lot of, mission and statement about that. Just counterculture revolutionary shit, man. I mean, my brother's more the hippie generation, the boomer generation. I'm Generation X, and there was some of us in Generation X, not a lot of us, unfortunately, but some of us were trying to build on the activism of the boomers and the hippies and the punks and the freaks and the hip hop artists and what was happening, in the 70s and 80s. We were trying to build on that. Unfortunately, a big part of my generation was trying to just make money and be a bunch of selfish pricks. But we, there were a lot of us that were trying to do something more meaningful. So that's how I carried on. And then, when I was done with grad school, that's when I learned that acting, the American theater and the American film and television industry just was a little bit too sober a place for me, for someone who was advocating for cannabis the way I was. And it was really hard for me to find a spot, in that world, in those worlds. So I went back home and I joined my brother, and I took care of my mom was sick at that time, so I helped take care of my mom, and that's when I fully committed to the cannabis trail. I didn't know it at the time that I was fully committed to the cannabis trail, so I was still doing independent film here or there. I got to be on a couple more TV programs that shot on the East Coast, and I was on The Wire.
Oh, you were?
I was on.
What did you do?
I ended up on the cutting room floor of the pilot of The Wire, and I was also on Homicide: Life on the Street. Both those shows shot in Baltimore.
The cutting room floor.
I was edited out. I had a small part in the pilot that was just 2-3 lines. And
Damn.
They ended up cutting it out. So
if they didn't cut it out, your life would have been so different.
Well, I was good friends with the casting director, but shortly after that I moved to L.A.
Okay.
So I got out of D.C. shortly after that, and shortly after that we opened Harborside. In between those two things, my brother got busted, and that was a whole nother endurance test for all of us. But I was sort of moving away from. I still had to dream, being the next, I guess, Jack Nicholson, but I increasingly understood it was not as realistic a path for me.
Yeah, for sure.
So
when did the light go off and you said, I'm doing this cannabis thing 100%?
Well, my brother got busted, and then that was a disaster. And
how did that happen? If you don't.
Well, he stayed on the East Coast. I came to California. The idea was we would move to California, and we were going to shut down. We had both a legal hemp company in D.C. at that time. We also had a robust wholesale business.
Yeah. And was that up and down 95? It
was all over, man. It was all over. But and so I came out here first. I went down to L.A. We were working on some creative projects. My brother and I together were trying to write a movie. Yeah. And 3 months after I got out here, he got popped with a really bad one.
Yeah.
And some good friends of ours were involved in it also. And some really bad things occurred with the whole case, and people lost their lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we had to endure that. and I couldn't sell weed for a few years. I had to go. I taught. I went and I taught. I eventually got a job as a professor at my alma mater, Chapman, and I did a little bit of work at the American Film Institute. And I just grinded out enough money teaching. Every once in a while, I'd sell a little bit of weed, but not a lot. And I just had to lay really low because we were hot. And my brother had a legal case. And, I had to... My parents were traumatized by all this. And they had to leverage their homes to bail my brother out and to fight the legal case. So I had to make sure I didn't get busted.
Yeah.
And I had to just deal with that. So once we emerged from all of that, the Harborside opportunity was the next thing we did.
How many years was that endurance test there?
About 5.
5, got you. And now, did you have plans to open a dispensary in California, or did you just sort of fall upon that?
We always wanted to have legal cannabis businesses. We always wanted to sell cannabis.
Yeah.
We were cannabis traders.
Okay.
So we traded cannabis. We had a hemp clothing company. We made clothes out of hemp in the 90s in D.C.
Was that a successful business?
For a time, it
Okay.
was, yeah. We had over $1 million of sales at one time. What happened was the Chinese hemp in the late 90s really took the bottom out of the market, and we didn't want to sell Chinese hemp. So
exactly.
So we pivoted to California. And shortly after that is when my brother got busted, and I pivoted to California. But you couldn't get a license to open a dispensary until 05, 06.
Gotcha.
So
when did you open Harborside?
And after the bust, we had to have a license.
Yeah.
We had to have 06. October 3rd, 2006.
06.
So is when we opened Harborside.
Got you. How you doing? Man, 06 Harborside, and then what were the original goals and plans for Harborside? Opening, and what did you look to do?
Well, I think the way you and your listeners might be able to relate to it most is it's like opening a restaurant. And you're always trying to create something new and different that people haven't experienced before, that hopefully is unique and elevates the experience. Now, in the world of restaurants have been around a long time, and there's been many brilliant chefs and business models and empires, and the challenge of doing that is different than in 06 with medical cannabis dispensaries. At that time, there were really only 2 kinds of dispensaries. One were run by activists, super well-intentioned people, but didn't create such a great business experience.
Yeah.
And then you had gangsters who basically were running weed out the back door, and there's all this bulletproof glass, and it wasn't a good experience either, And so we tried to create something that was different than those 2 models.
Uh-huh.
And we didn't want any bars on the windows. We didn't want any bulletproof glass. We got insurance. We built really great vaults. We had all kinds of cash and inventory protocols that, our shrink rate was less than 1% the first 2 or 3 years we were open, which is remarkable. And you develop a culture of trust, and you make sure people have what they're taken care of, so that they don't steal from you.
Yeah, for sure.
So all those things make a difference, and we also had free health care services we gave because we were a nonprofit. You had to be a nonprofit in those days by law.
Yeah.
We were very transparent with everything, and people would come to Harborside, get cannabis. They'd come take a yoga class or a Reiki class.
Yeah.
They'd come write a letter to a prisoner and get free weed for doing that. They'd come to a free grow class, grow your own. They could buy clones. They could buy seeds. So it was really more of a community center we were trying to build, not just a quote-unquote dispensary.
Yeah.
And we're always trying to build community. I think that's what restaurants do too.
Of course, yeah.
One of the tragedies of this pandemic, and I'm sure you've discussed it ad nauseum on your podcast, is just these community centers known as restaurants and cafes and coffee shops just got totally obliterated with very little help.
Yeah.
From the public resources that should be there to support our community centers. And it's the same thing, with dispensaries. We got lucky. We were considered essential services, but we got no relief, no PP loans, no financial relief, no anything. And it was really hard. And so we tried to build. That's the original vision with Harborside and I'm happy to report it worked. The vision came true. It exceeded our vision.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's nuts. So, correct me if I'm wrong. You guys had a reality TV show?
Yeah.
At the dispensary? I didn't know anything about this, and I did a little research, and I was like, Weed Wars.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, around, by 2008, 2009, we were seeing 1,000 people a day at our Oakland shop, and by then we had a second shop in San Jose.
Okay.
And my brother was the only cannabis leader. We were the only cannabis company at that time, and my brother the only leader of a cannabis company at that time that was willing to let
everyone in.
Let the media in.
Okay.
Because people are too scared that they get busted by the feds if they appeared on TV.
Had you been busted by the feds up until that time? Before Weed Wars? Or raided or anything?
No, we had not, but lots of other folks had been.
Okay.
And we were, of course, worried about that. We did get hit after Weed Wars. But,
okay.
But before Weed Wars, we did not. And
so when you opened up and were transparent, that's when they went after you.
Well, the TV show pissed them off.
Okay.
So the TV show really pissed them off because what the good part, whenever you do a reality TV show, there's good things and there's not so good things. The good things was we were able to show the world that you could have a cannabis dispensary, community center. It could be a force of good in the town for the people coming in, and you could heal your very sick folks, and you could build something positive. Mm-hmm. Because everybody thought that a weed dispensary was a bad thing, in Kansas and Indiana and Texas and Florida and even New York and Massachusetts. It was all illegal. Even Colorado was illegal then. Or maybe not for medical. But California was still the only place at that time. So the Hollywood people got very interested. They read some of our media that Steve had done, and they reached out to us and said, you want to do a reality TV show? We think we can sell it to a major network or cable provider. And so we talked about it for a long time. We had a lot of robust debates. I was eager to do it just because I had a background in acting and theater, and, it was a chance for me to bring these two things together very nicely. My brother was eager to do it because, we're telling the story of cannabis is what we do.
Yeah.
So, but we had to convince our team. We had to convince our families. It's a very evasive thing to do. We had cameras following us around every day for a year.
Was anybody upset with that? Was anybody like,
sure.
I don't want to do that? Yeah. Yeah, people probably leave their employment or their position.
Oh, no. The people that had a harder time with it were people that were very close to Steve and I that were shy to be on camera.
Okay.